everyone, and welcome to our December webinar. My name is Kate Shook, and I'm the Research Impact Officer at the Research Impact Academy. I'm excited to be hosting this special webinar because it's our 10-year anniversary at the Research Impact Academy, and we'll be sharing the 10 most valuable lessons we've learned over the past decade to help you create, capture, and communicate impact more effectively. Our speakers for today, for those of you that don't know them, are Dr. Tamika Heiden, RIA's Principal and Founder, and Cathie Withyman, RIA's Impact Communications Specialist. Tamika has trained thousands of researchers worldwide in research impact and knowledge translation. With over a decade of experience across health, sport, and medical research, Tamika advises higher education, government, and industry sectors on embedding research impact practices. She is an honorary research fellow at Murdoch Children's Research Institute, serves on the Medical Research Foundation's Scientific Committee, and partners with Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. Tamika has made contributions to high-level decision-making, including providing evidence to the Senate Committee for the Medical Research Future Fund. Tamika also founded the annual Research Impact Summit in 2016, reaching over 7,300 participants across 101 countries with over 200 interviews from international experts. And Cathie has more than 20 years of experience working with universities and government departments worldwide. She is passionate about helping researchers turn their work into compelling stories. Over the past 6 years, Cathie has partnered with Tamika at RIA to work one-on-one with over 1,000 researchers, helping them to craft powerful impact narratives and secure over $240 million in research funding. Together, they've developed innovative programs like the Impact Catalyst program, which is building a global network of research impact practitioners in Australia and the UK. Driven by a deep commitment to action and collaboration, Cathie is proud to support researchers to share their stories in ways that resonate with audiences and spark real-world change. Welcome, Cathie and Tamika.
Excellent. Thank you, Kate. Anything you want to add to begin with, Cathie?
No, just hi, everyone. Great to be here. And yeah, I think let's just get started and we'll jump in.
We'll just, look, 10 years. If you had asked me 10 years ago if we would be doing a presentation in 10 years about what we'd achieved, I would never have believed it. So feeling incredibly blessed to still be doing this work and helping people and to have a great team like Cathie and Kate along on that journey with me. So I thought maybe we could just start off a little bit, not too much. You can download our full report, but I just thought for some of you might not know really kind of why we exist and when we started. So really it was a crazy idea in 2014 and I started up as an organisation called Knowledge Translation Australia, focused on the Australian market, but now working all over. And, you know, along the way, there are a few things that kind of happened, but ultimately in 2016, so 2 years after launching, started up a membership to create a community, and that's what I've really tried to make everything about is community. And then in 2018, started growing the team. So brought on an advisory panel with experts from around the world. Cathie joined me and started working, which was amazing. I got my executive assistant who is in the Philippines. And so that was a really nice growth of the team that happened there. Then continued to grow with some international associates. Some of you might know them, some people in the UK, some Australian ones, and also brought on a digital marketing coordinator who most of these slides and things are created by her. So it's amazing. And then Kate came on in 2022, so the newest addition to the team. And as we go, you know, we've just been working on lots of case studies, and this year has been amazing because we launched our Catalyst program. Some of you here are actually in our Catalyst program in the UK and in Australia. And so it's been a really massive time over that. Thanks for joining and for that message, Catherine. That's amazing. So you know, a little bit about us. And it's, you know, what's really interesting is when you reflect on things, and I don't know if people have done this, and I think this is really important when we work in research impact, is to reflect on kind of how we got to places and what we did. And one of the things that we teach people and we talk about all the time is starting with a goal. And something that we know about goals is that if you write them down, you have a greater chance of achieving them. And so it's really interesting when we sort of started this and went back and went, you know, what's on, you know, what are our values? What did I write down like years ago that I kind of went, oh, okay, that'll do. That'll be your values. That's how I feel about what we do. I put a bit of thought into it. But, you know, over time you think, oh, things will change. But when we kind of pulled these back out for our report, I realized they still really resonated and sat with exactly how we operate. So I think that process of writing them down actually helped me to create that bigger impact and working that way. So I think that's really important for all of us as either people supporting impact or as practitioners of impact or trying to have an impact, is we actually need to write down what it is we're trying to do and how we're trying to do that. So we really focus on, you know, being a catalyst for change. We want to help people to change, and we want to be a bit different. So, you know, being a bit innovative in how we operate. We want to inspire people to actually make change. So we make it simple and try to inspire people to do this work. And also, you know, one of my favorites is solutions, not problems, because the last thing we want to do is give you more problems. We want to help people to have solutions.
And I think for me, that's a big one in working with Tamika for the last 6 years, is she and the business now, all of us that work for her, are all about solutions, not problems. You know, it's like, well, how do we make things easier for people? How do we break things down? How do we explain things in easy to digest and understandable ways? What solution can we come up with for someone? And over the years, we've had lots of challenging things where we've kind of been, heck, you know, what's the solution look like to this? And so I think having that solution focus has been really important, and that translates through to researchers as well. You know, you're always looking for a solution or the next answer to a puzzling problem or situation. So yeah, it was very interesting to reflect, and when we sort of wrote them down and began talking about them in putting together our 10 years, we were like, oh my gosh, we do this every single day, but without thinking about it. So yeah, thanks for showing them again, Tamika.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So what we thought we'd do on this session today is we really just wanted to share with you 10 things, because it's been 10 years, but don't worry, they're not one from every year or anything. Just 10 things that we think that help to perfect our research impact and to help do that. And we, for the last, I don't know, I think we started it in around 2020, really have been focusing on what we call the CCC of impact, the creation, the capture, and the communication of that impact. So we're going to go through those particular elements and count down our 10 things to perfect and to perfecting kind of impact. And as we do that, like I said, if you've got questions, hopefully there'll be something here that's a little tool or tip or trick for you as you go. Okay, so I don't know, Cathie, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. So under the create impact, so this is the beginning, you know, thinking about, well, how do we create impact? What are the things that we need to do to create impact? And importantly, the number one thing when we're thinking about creating impact is planning is really, really critical. We're not going to have an impact if we don't plan for it. And why do we need to plan for it? And why do we need to think about impact? Well, impact pathways, or some form of them, are in most funding applications. You're asked to talk about how you're going to create impact. It's sometimes different words are used, but essentially most funding applications will ask you for an impact pathway. Also, your impact track records are now being assessed. If you're in the UK, you know all about national assessments. Hong Kong, Poland have national assessments. But individually as well, for a lot of grants now, your track record is also being assessed, and your impact from your research is also being evaluated and assessed to do with any promotion opportunities or promotion documents that you might have to submit. And also it helps with collaboration opportunities. So if you can show that you've had great impact, then people are more likely to want to come and work with you or collaborate with you on new projects. So it's really important. Number one is to think about planning for impact at the very beginning and outset of any research process. And when we think about planning and those pathways to impact, there's really two parts, and this is really interesting. It harks back to a story that Tamika often tells. When she came up with the name for the business, was originally Knowledge Translation Australia, because to get to impact, we need translation, or the pathway. And when she went out to canvass people and talk to them about knowledge translation, a lot of people said, oh, no, we're not really interested in translation. And she used to say to them, well, when you want to have an impact, come and talk to me. And people go, oh, impact? Oh, yeah, we want to know about impact. So we've made it our mandate almost for the last 10 years to teach and have people understand that to get to impact, you need to understand and do translation. So what is translation? It's the pathway to impact. It's the how we get to impact. And the impact is what happens because we translated our work, or our work was translated. So if you come from an evaluative mindset, you might think of translation as the independent variable and impact as the dependent variable. That being that the quality or the impact depends on our translation and how we got to creating the impact. So it's just really important to understand that it's the pathway to impact that's really important, and that's the one that we can plan and have an influence on. So if we think about pathways to impact, there's 10 key things that are really important to have a successful pathway to impact. The first one is you've got to know where you want to go. So that's all about vision, having a really clear vision of where the future is down the road if your work is adopted, adapted, or used in some way to create an impact. The second thing is specificity. So we need to be specific around what we hope to achieve, but also who's going to do what, who's our audience that we're trying to appeal to or talk to or engage with. So we need to put some specificity around things. And then good pathways to impact are tailor-made. They're tailor-made to suit the users of the research. So the people that are going to use the research, the pathway to impact has been tailored specifically for them, and it's been flexible to their needs, wants, and their particular context within which they're working. And then within the pathways to impact, there's been really clearly defined roles and responsibilities. So that's about keeping in mind that it's not always the researcher's responsibility to translate right through to impact, but it's about thinking about, well, what other people have roles and responsibilities in that pathway to impact. And then also they've found that great pathways to impact did their market research. They understood the context, they understood the users and the beneficiaries and the ways they wanted the information delivered to them. So they'd been really thorough in thinking about and exploring what was needed and why. And then importantly, they had collaborative partnerships. So it wasn't just the researcher working on their own, they were collaborative and working with others. They had sensitivities to individual context and circumstances, and they showed long-term thinking. So that ties back to that vision. There was a long-term pathway or goal to be achieved. And then lastly, everything was recorded, because if we're going to talk about impact and talk about successful pathways to impact, then we need to record everything so we know what's happened, what's changed, and what the results have been. And I love this quote that we've got at the bottom from Mark Reed, who is one of our colleagues in the UK. And he says that early engagement with stakeholders and the right identification are essential elements for successful research impact. So what we've done with our presentation tonight is you'll notice on some of the slides we've popped in some quotes from really great colleagues in the industry, and they're actually quotes that we've pulled from the Impact Summit interviews over the last 7 years. So there'll be little quotes, 9 years, not 7. There'll be quotes scattered throughout. So if you're interested in learning any more about the Impact Summit, we'll talk about that at the end of the presentation today. Might just jump over to you, Tamika.
Sure. It's your croaky. Okay. So second point that we wanted to bring up of our 10, so you'll know when we get to the end because it will be a 10. Okay, second point. Having a clear-cut process is the best way to plan for impact. So one of the things that has become really, really apparent to us is just make it easy and have a really clear-cut process for people to plan or to get impact out of people's heads. We've found that logic models are really helpful. And of course, there are lots of different models, like the Canadian Academy of Science has a model. There's a payback framework model. There's the Kellogg Foundation model. It's a linear representation of a really non-linear process. So we acknowledge that, they always look really linear. But one of the things that we found in our work was that most logic models and most models we came across for impact were missing a key piece. And that key piece was it was missing the users. And we know that impact is ultimately all about people. So we developed our own logic model of impact. Some of you on the call might have seen it before, others may not. If you've seen it before, I'm sorry, we're going to show it to you anyway for those that haven't seen it, because you might be interested in it. So this is our kind of logic model, and we call it a bit of our user-centric logic model. And for those people that are interested, we actually have shared this now under a Creative Commons license, so people can use it and get it from our website. Kate might actually find the link for that and put it in the chat while we're going through. So ultimately, our logic model, yes, it's like the usual logic model of impact, so based on sort of the Kellogg model. But the thing we've done is put the users in. So we've got our inputs that go into the research that gets done, or the projects that get done. The outputs and activities being those things that people do to share the information, so exhibitions or seminars or training, publications, standards. It depends on what context you're working in. Then we have this user. So we've put the users in. So this next user. So that's the consumer of those outputs. So that's, your audiences, your NGOs, your government, community organizations, industry groups, customers, depending on, again, on the type of research and what's coming out of that. So we wanted to put them in there to make it really clear, because then the outcomes, or those early impacts, are the change that's happened because somebody's used that work. So someone might have adopted a protocol or a technique, so that next user may have adopted something, or maybe it's led to a change in understanding, or maybe a practice change, or a policy change. So there could have been an influence on a particular industry organization that led to a change in how they operate or how they do something, or a sales of new products or something like that. Then the impact column, obviously you're in the UK, many of you, some of you in Australia, but this is the scary column. It takes a long time. And this is the change, the measurement of the change that's happened because someone used the output. So a volume of the volume of sales of a product, or maybe there's been a change to social cohesion, or some kind of environmental impact based on an influence that happened to a policy, and then that change in policy. And so we see through this pathway, this is really helpful. So we found that when we worked with people, having a really logical process to step through and get someone to think about impact was really helpful. And we use this most times we work with people, mostly because, as we said, we're trying to make it simpler. Yes, it is simple, very simplified. We acknowledge there's a lot of complexity that sits behind each of these pieces, but when we're working with people, typically what we found is they just want to know how to write about it, or they want to know how to plan it. So we use this in a prospective way and a retrospective way. We also have the simplified version, which people really love. So what enabled the research? How was the knowledge shared, or how were those findings packaged up and delivered in some way? Who it was shared with, so that next user, the uptake, adoption, or the use of those outputs being that outcome, and then the simplest definition of impact, the consequence of someone using the research output. What's been that consequence longer term of someone initially taking that piece of knowledge, that evidence, that toolkit, whatever it is, off the shelf, if you like, to think about it that way, and adopting that in their work, and then there's a consequence from that. So that's our very simplified model that we think helps people to start thinking about that. When we don't have the user, it feels weird because we jump from I created this thing and now it's changed the world, to having something much more simple like that. Okay. Do you want to go on to this one, Cathie?
Yeah, sure. I think I've got rid of my croak in my voice. Thank you. Okay, so number 3 in our list of 10 is about being creative and thinking about creative ways in how you can share your work. And that's about thinking, well, how can I tailor the output? So by output, we mean, as from the logic model, is how are you packaging up your findings or your knowledge to share with others? So it's about tailoring the output for the specific audience or user of that output. So remembering that journal articles are not the only way to share your knowledge, and they're not always the best option to share your knowledge as well. So think outside the box and be a bit creative. There's all manner of different ways that we can share our knowledge to make sure it gets used into the hands of the people that will use it and do something with that knowledge. So we love this quote from Tullio, who runs a company called Visualize Your Science. And he says that storytelling and emotional connection are crucial in conveying scientific concepts effectively. So what that means is that telling a story or making people feel something related to your work is very important in having them actually understand it, but then also use it or adopt it or adapt it in some way. So let's think about some of the creative ways. And as I said, there is so many different ways, but this is just a sample of some of the creative ways that we can share our outputs. So there's things like data visualization. So that might be through diagrams or infographics or different ways to show data so that it creates something meaningful or understandable for people. It might be 3D printing of prototypes or scientific models, again, so they can be visually understood. It might be around creating audio versions of findings so they're more accessible to a wider range of the population. It could be about thinking about delivering visual policy briefs rather than just a written text-based document, or sharing knowledge through forums or feedback from non-academic audiences. And we see a lot of people do that really successfully with social media these days. It might be around creating immersive experiences for people, or running co-designed community workshops, or developing up some animations or cartoons that break things down and make the findings or the message really easy to understand. Creating infographics, or doing simple things like pop-up exhibits or interactive kiosks out in the community to share the knowledge or the research in some way. Developing one-page executive summaries, or using the tools that are evolving so quickly, things like virtual reality or augmented reality, to create really immersive experiences for people. And we're seeing a lot of galleries and tourism destinations use these technologies really well to get across research findings, but in ways that actually make it really engaging for the audience to understand. And I love that people are getting more and more creative in how they actually are sharing their outputs. Anyone that's attended any of our training, you'll remember us talking about the Tokyo subway map. So what we mean is we want people to actually receive the information in a way that they can understand, that's not confusing, perhaps like a Tokyo subway map is.
Excellent. Okay, so number 4 is all about relationships. We know that relationships are key. There's been research that's shown that the likelihood of someone using your research knowledge is based more on the strength of your relationship with that person than on the strength of the evidence that you're sharing with them. So in thinking about that, we like to talk about a baton pass and how that baton pass is really key to what we're doing. So that's that passing that baton to the next user. So it's important to think about who you're passing it to, who are your stakeholders, who are those users, who are those beneficiaries, because you need to build relationships with them. So this came from Rachel Blanche in the latest summit interviews this year, where really it was about thinking through those relationships and how the time spent building them is absolutely valuable. It's not just about meeting compliance, but it also makes meaning that's going to lead to that lasting impact. And so that was a really lovely message from that interview this year. So as I said, we've got this passing the baton, and so we like to think of the analogy of, the relay with the passing the baton, where you've got that knowledge, which is the baton, and the next user and how we're passing that on. And the one thing that we always talk about here is really to say, if you go to pass the baton and the person isn't there, we all know this in the relay, right? You get there, if the person's not there, you're not going to win the race. If the person drops it, you're not going to win the race. They don't know what to do with it. If they haven't trained or they don't know that they've got to take it, you're not going to win the race and have that impact. And even worse, if you get there with your knowledge, your output from your research, and they say, I'm not interested, this has got nothing to do with me, I didn't sign up for this, then probably not going to have an impact. So it's a really great analogy to think about, how do we continue to keep things moving forward and passing it on so that it gets down the line to have that impact. And we have seen like the biggest aha moments from people when we start to talk about this, particularly when we talk to academics who might be feeling quite overwhelmed. They might hear some language around the end user or the consumer, and suddenly we're saying, just think about who's next, just one person next or another person next or a couple of next people or next groups, and think about that, because if you get there, then you can get to the next step. And we have this real, I think I can do that. I think I can think one step forward. So it's a really, that's been a massive learning for us. So really thinking about those next users rather than just the end users. And it matters because it's stressful when we think about it, even if we're thinking about the same group. So even though we might call it an end user, or just thinking who's next, then who's next, then who's next, and you're going to get that relay baton all the way around to that finish line. So we're going to jump into now the next element, which is capture impact, and continue on our top 10. So Cathie, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So we did 4 in the first C. The next C has 3, I think. So in capturing impact, which is the middle C in our triple Cs, usually this is where we see the roadblocks come in, where people start going, I don't know where to start. I'm not sure what's happened with my research. How do I even know where to find my impact? Where do I go looking? Who do I ask? How do I even know if I've actually had an impact? And I've had one researcher say to me, it's all been a terrible waste of time and my work hasn't had any impact at all. I've been doing this for 20 years and it's been a failure. Well, I'm here to say that it's not a failure, just sometimes it takes a bit of work to actually capture or go back and find impact that might have been created. And we like to say, look, there's 2 key questions. If you only remember 2 things tonight, then these are the things that you should remember. There's 2 questions that you need to ask. Who used your work? And then what happened? So by who used your work is, who did you partner with, or who were the beneficiaries, or who did you pass the baton to when you shared your findings? And what were those batons? So what were the outputs that you shared? And then once you've got that, then you can go and ask or find out what happened. So when you're thinking about how do I begin to capture my impact, you've got to have something that you can share with someone and then record, well, who did you share it with? And then you can go back and ask them what happened because you shared it with them. What happened if they used it? Did they adopt it? Did they adapt it? And you can go from there. Tamika, I'll let you do this one because I get confused.
No worries. Yeah, no worries. Look, I thought I'd get that baton pass from you right there. And I will just say it's morning for some of you, so, keeping that in mind as well. So I know it's Monday morning too, so you're probably going, this is heavy on a Monday morning. Okay, so a lot of questions that get asked to us, and I'm a real thinker, so anyone who's met me knows that I go away, I think on these things, and I try to come up with solutions because it's just the way my brain operates. And so one of the things that people kept saying is, how do we track our impact? How do we capture our impact? It's a lot of work for me to go and do all this, and I don't have time, and all those objections that we get. And so I started thinking about this, and I sort of came up with a bit of an idea, and so I want to share that with you. And it doesn't always work, but I think this is a bit of a strategy we can use. So if we start by thinking about the output, now perhaps the output in this case, the example is a new service delivery model that's been delivered from a program of research. And perhaps the outcome of that is that we've had someone come along and adopt it into the model uptake this model into service delivery, right? And so that means, you know, they're going to use it within their organization, and perhaps they're going to roll it out across a number of branches and other organizations. And that's great. So we've got some outcome there, but how are we going to know that, right? And ultimately what we're going to look for is this impact. So, you know, maybe they're going to be able to say there's been a change to a beneficiary in some way because of that, or maybe there's been an improvement in service delivery because of that. So that would be the ultimate kind of impact, what's happened since that adoption of that program. But we acknowledge that there's an absolute messy piece here, and that's where the people come in, those users. It's messy. We're dealing with personalities, we're dealing with timing, we're dealing with lots of other things. But it's here also where the baton pass happens. And so my suggestion, after thinking, is that perhaps as we do this baton pass, we pass on 2 or 3 questions that help to do this. So the first thing is, perhaps as we're sharing knowledge from research with a particular user, we ask them, what's the change you're expecting to see? You've said you're going to adopt this into your practice, into your service. What are you expecting to see? And they might give you something that's basically an indicator that you can start to think about for later. The second question would be, well, how will you know that that's happened? What's your evaluation process? What's success look like? And they might come back and say, you know what, we hadn't thought about that. That's really interesting. Can you come and do an evaluation? Or they might say, every time we change something, we go back and we evaluate it and we do a report every 6 months, in which case, then all you need to do is to say, you know, can I come back? Can I get a copy of that report? Can I, you know, have that when you've done it? Because then they're measuring your impact for you. So they're the questions I think you can pass on as you do that baton pass. And then from there, you have that evaluation piece that happens between that outcome and that impact. And this is where you start to say, what are those indicators? What did they think would change? Okay, did that happen? You go back, you ask them. So I think we can kind of pass on the responsibility for some of this as well. So I can continue on this one if you want. I'll just talk about number 6 here. So this is it sort of leads on really nice, because I was just talking about indicators, and we've seen a big confusion between indicators and evidence. And indicators are either quantitative or qualitative, and they're things that they sort of provide that means to track. So they give you the elements to report on and to track what's changed. So has it been a percentage change or a time change and so on? And we know that having a baseline can be really useful for this. But different to that is evidence, and evidence are the sources that prove your impact. So it's the proof. So if the indicator is dollars in sales, the evidence might be from the company sales report. If the indicator is the time to triage patients, it may be that we have to get that from the hospital report, or a testimonial gave us that. If it's around number of citations of publications, as an example, it's where you got that Scopus, SciVal, or metric. If it's an influence on policy, it could be a testimonial or a citation in that policy document. So sometimes the evidence and the indicators are combined, but you know, often people will say to us, how do I evidence that? And I'll say, well, how do you know it happened? What's the proof? And they'll say, someone told me. Great. Okay, we've got some personal communication. So we need to have both, and we need to understand that it does take a bit of time to get this evidence, but we have to have the indicator that shows what happened and the evidence as the proof to back up that this is how we know this happened. So they're the 2 kind of things that people get confused about. Cathie, you get to do tools.
Thank you. So number 7 is we wanted to share with you that you don't have to do it all by yourself. There are some tools out there. There are some tools that help to capture and track your impact. Many of you will be familiar with some of them, but basically the tools fall into 2 types of categories. So there's tools that help us find or uncover our impact. And they're things like altmetric and dimensions, overturn, open syllabus, lens. I'm sure you've heard of most of those ones these days. So they will give you metrics and things that you can use when you're uncovering your impact. And then the other type of tools are those ones that help us capture and store our impact so we can go back and write about our impacts. Now, that second type of tool is only as good as the information that's put into it. So it does rely on people to enter data. So that could be things like Hive, which was known as Impact Tracker, Pure, A lot of universities have their own systems now to capture impact so that it makes it easier to write about down the track. So there's all manner of tools. As I said, you don't have to do it by yourself. And tools offer us lots of things, and they offer us a way to, Kat's comment next, please, Tamika. They offer us a way to think about tracking not just, number of citations, but also what's the level of engagement with the output that we shared? What online activity is taking place? What's going on around a specific research output? So, the output might be a journal article or a book or an image, and you can now track the impact or the engagement that's happening with that. Using Altmetric, it will track things like social media shares, mentions in the media, all different types of things. So it's really great. What's really important to understand as a researcher, whenever you're sharing an output, share the DOI. If it's a journal article or a book, then make sure you're sharing the DOI with it, because that's what Altmetric uses to track the engagement. So there's tools out there. We include a lot more in a lot of our workshops that we go deep into them. But that's just a little taste of that. You don't have to do it all yourself. There's tools out there, and they're emerging all the time and getting better with AI as things advance.
Yeah, and if you've got any others that you use, please, share them in the list, because I think or in the chat, because I think there's others out there. Sage Policy Profiles is another one that's really useful. So number 8, communicating impact. We're going to jump into that. So we know that language matters. There's been some great studies around this. Bella Reichardt has been a summit speaker, I think twice now, but in 2020, she was a speaker for us. And I know that for me, I learned a lot from her around how language really matters to what we're saying when we're communicating. So using active language, establishing links between research and impact in that really active way. So these are just some examples of language adopted, used by, and cited in. And I want to give some examples now of just those keywords. And even just today, we were working with a group on impact, and I said to them, you haven't used any of the keywords that show impact. So, often we're looking for these words: used, adopted, informed, influenced, adapted, changed, enhanced, really active language. And if you're flipping it around to do prospective, you can say has the potential to be adopted, or the potential to influence, or the potential to enhance. But these are really keywords that we look for when we're reading about impact, that show that baton pass, if you like, that difference that's kind of come from that. Cathie, number 9.
Oh, number 9. So number 9 is all around, it's really important to understand the purpose of your communication. So if you're thinking about grant writing, which is tricky in any case, thinking about what are they actually asking me here? Are they asking me for a pathway to impact? Well, who's the funder that I'm writing to this grant for? Are they a philanthropic funder? Are they an industry group? Is it a government funding body? Because they will all be looking for different ways to talk about impact, different pathways to impact, different alignment with their own priorities. So it's about being really clear about what you're writing about. So often that's just read the guidelines really, really clearly and understand things. Are you writing for a scientific or a more general audience? Because that will influence the language that you use. And then we showed you the logic model that we use with every single client that we work with pretty much. We find it really, really useful to map impact before we start writing about it. So we mapped the logic model, we mapped what were the outputs, who were the users, what were the outcomes, and what were the impacts, because then it helps with the writing, because we have a plan. We have the tool laid out in front of us, and then we just put the words around it. So mapping is really a really great way to help you communicate your impact.
Okay, and now we're up to number 10, and this is, it came up in those top 10 things to have in your pathway to impact. And this is about your vision. And so knowing the vision, knowing where you want to get to, and using that. And we've found that having a really clear vision helps people to both write about what the intention is for their impact, but also to speak with potential funders or stakeholders or other groups, so those people they ultimately want to create relationships with, to be really clear on why they're doing what they're doing. So it's their why. You're articulating, why am I a researcher? Why am I doing the work I'm doing? Why am I supporting research? Why am I doing whatever it is I'm doing? So it's the why. And then really you can have a vision statement, or, you know, across many areas of your professional life or your personal vision, or a project. We've had groups we've worked with where they've gone away and they've come back and said, for every project, the team got together and now we just know the vision of each of those projects. We all know why we show up. If you're in the area where you're employing team members or bringing on collaborators for anything, really clearly having a vision for you as a team can be really useful, because you know whether or not people have the same values and the same ambition as you do, and that can help with alignment. This is just an example of a really nice and concise vision statement from a woman in Toronto called Dr. Anna Taddeo. And you can see here that she used this actually in the media, and it's just really clear. So when she was being asked about what she does, she was able to really clearly say, my vision is to make children all over the world healthier by improving their experiences during needle procedures. So really clear, really concise, and we know what she stands for. So what makes that really good vision statement? It's concise and motivating. It needs to be high level. It's not a goal. It's actually a vision statement. It's easy to memorize and repeat, so it's not long. It's got to be realistic. It's got to describe a really bright future, because no one wants the doom and gloom. And I don't think we hear too many negative visions. And it states your intentions, so summarizes all your values. So it inspires the people around you. It can inspire others to come with you on the journey. And we know that, you know, this quote from Simon Sinek is great. He has the whole Start With Why book and TED Talk. And if you haven't seen it, it's a really great resource to have a look at. So overall, we have these lessons. Cathie, do you want to summarize?
Right, yep. So the 10 lessons from 10 years, and as Tamika said, it wasn't one a year. But really importantly, planning is critical. If you don't plan to have an impact, then you're pretty much not going to have an impact. Using the logic model really helps you to plan for the impact that you want to have, and then also to write about impact if you're writing retrospectively. Think about being creative. You know, a journal article is not the be all and end all of ways to share your outputs or your findings or your knowledge from your research. So be creative in the ways that you can share that knowledge. And importantly, that sharing of knowledge is very much relationship based. It's based on people. Remember what Tamika said, the chance of people using your knowledge is based more on the strength of the relationship than the quality of the findings. So just keep that in mind. It's all about people. And don't, you know, don't put those roadblocks in the way. Remember those two questions: who used your work, and then what happened? Thinking about and understanding the difference between evidence and indicators. They are different, and indicators are the things that show change. Evidence is the proof of that change. And there are tools to help you. If you hadn't heard of some of those tools, you can go back to the slides when we send them out and have a look at them. There's lots of different tools. They're great. Use that impact language, words that motivate, that imply change or movement forward. Thinking about what's the purpose of your communications, remembering who you're writing for. And then number 10, but really, really importantly, have a really clear vision for your work.
So just for your info, we have put together a report over the last 10 years of kind of our journey. If you're interested in that, you can go and download the report to read a little bit more about us and the journey. And we've actually logic model mapped our own journey so that we've used it in a different context in that way and really spoken about the impact that we've had over 10 years. Because everyone gets into this thing for 10 years for impact, and 10 years is a long time to do that. The other thing that we wanted to do is just to let you know that we have really excitingly this year our membership site, which has been like little bit tired. You know, I started as a bit of a passion project on the side at one point, and over the years, it's kind of kept getting people in there and stuff. Well, we've just actually relaunched it. We've made it a new site. We've actually got new learning pathways, new content. It's easy to navigate, great search functionality now. So we've put a lot of work into that to make it even better. So we have done that. And as part of our 10 years, we've decided that we would give away 50% off for 50 people. Crazy, I know. But if you're interested in that, you can go to the website. You'll find that information, or we'll put it in the chat or send it out in some way. And then the other thing I wanted to share with you is some exciting things that are happening next year. And I'm going to announce something that a lot of people might not know, which is a little bit of a under wraps scenario at the moment, and is still a work in progress, but hopefully by end of January, I'm fingers crossed that we'll be rolling this out to early adopters anyway. So the first one is a tool that we're building that's going to be our own AI tool that we're going to start to share with the market. And this is an impact planning tool or an impact acceleration tool. So we are going to be, we've put together an AI impact tool that uses ChatGPT and a few other tools. Doesn't learn from it though. It's all, it's a special, it's its own software that people can use to plan out. And we've had a few people already trying it out that love it and have given us some great feedback. And so we have this this tool, and this is a bit of a mock-up of maybe like what the logo might be like. We're still kind of finalizing it at the moment. But please get excited. It's not just going to be one of these big institutional sorts of tools. We're going to definitely be doing a, you know, individual people can buy it or whatever, because I really, there's nothing irks me more than people saying it's really out of reach for me. So we want to make this something that people can access and use. So that's very much a goal. So keep an eye on this space. And if you're interested in that kind of thing and want to maybe have a look early on, do let me know, because we'll be sort of starting to think about that early in the next year. Okay. The other thing, I think maybe, do I need to hand back to you, Kate, for this? Yeah.
Yes, we've just got our January webinar coming up with the CEO of SciSpace, which is an amazing AI tool that can help simplify your reading and writing. And yeah, it's a great new AI tool that we think a lot of people should know about. So we've got Sakiran coming in to tell us all about it and give us a walkthrough of the tool.
Yeah, great. It's taken a little while to get this on organised, so it should be good.
Yeah.
And then obviously we're running the Impact Catalyst program again in the UK next year, probably in November at this point, I would say. So we do have an EOI form for people who are interested. If you don't know about our Impact Catalyst program, it's our Train the Trainer program for people who support impact, specifically designed to help and create a community of people who are supporting impact. We had a couple of people here tonight from our program. So, and it's a year-long program. So if you are interested and want to stay on the mailing list for that, just let us know. But we'll be sort of announcing that a bit more early on next year. The year's gotten away from us this year. And then finally, yeah, Kate, we want feedback from today.
We'd love to hear your feedback on the webinars, any suggestions for topics, or what you'd like to see from us. You can give us some feedback through the link there.
Thank you, everyone. It's been lovely. Thank you for joining us. And look, if you've got questions or thoughts afterwards, reach out. Yeah. Please do the survey. We, yeah, you know, I love learning. I'm learning every single day. I'm learning from the people who come here, the questions that get asked, and you know, this is not a set and forget scenario. Anyone in impact knows we're constantly learning. And that's why I think I love it so much.
So thank you everyone for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you at a webinar in the future.